Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Denzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Denzel. I hope everybody's had a great week. Yesterday I detailed how this week, at least the beginning of it, was a little rough for me, for my family. I think that's all getting sorted out in Pennsylvania now as I speak. Just have to get my mother the right care that she needs. I think otherwise she's going to be just fine. So things have calmed down at least a little bit for me here in Florida. However, you should know that next week, Monday and Tuesday, there will be no news shows anyway. I'm sure Red State Talk Radio will play probably some of my shows from this past week, repeat shows, because this weekend I'll be driving back to Pennsylvania. I'll be driving my parents' car back to Pennsylvania with all their stuff in it, being that they flew back. And then I will be flying back to Florida on Tuesday. So drive up there, I'm thinking Sunday, taking a day to just hang out on Monday, and then fly back on Tuesday. Also, there will be a repeat show tomorrow because I am attending a writers' conference all day, and I will not have an opportunity to do the show. So Friday, Monday, and Tuesday will be repeat shows. Hopefully nothing of extraordinary value will happen, and I won't feel bad about not being able to do my shows. It's funny how sometimes that just works that way. You know, there have been times where I've gone on vacation or something and haven't been able to do the show, and then something that I'd really like to talk about happens. It's just maybe that happens because I like to talk about so much. Maybe that's what it is. That's probably it as well, because I do take an interest in a lot of what goes on in the world. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. In addition, one more thing. Have you seen the reviews for the Batman versus Superman movie that came out at midnight yesterday? Not exactly the most glowing of reviews. I'm more of a Marvel guy, I guess, although I love the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I thought that they had a lot to say outside of it just being a superhero movie. There have been many connections between those movies and Terrorism and Occupy Wall Street and George W. Bush, and I think those comparisons are appropriate. But this, and I love the Avenger movies because I think they've done kind of the same thing. Privacy versus security, especially with Captain America, the Winter Soldier in particular, and the role of technology, the Age of Ultron movie. But this Batman versus Superman movie looked a little bit like a disaster to me from the beginning, looking at the previews, the trailers, and it seems like critics have been underwhelmed by it. But we'll see. Maybe I'll see it. Maybe I won't. I haven't really decided on that. But the reviews have not been exactly glowing. So let's get to the show. I had a talk, and I'm just going to state this. I don't think I'm talking too much out of school here. I don't think I am. But I had a chance to talk to a John Kasich voter. Since you heard me last, I had an opportunity to do that. And obviously there aren't many of them out there. There seem to be quite a few in Ohio, which makes sense since he's the governor there. But besides that, John Kasich has been running in pretty much last place. Of course, he did better than Donald Trump did in Utah, but I don't know if that means much because Ted Cruz ended up getting almost, 70% of the vote or something. So even if John Kasich had gotten the rest of the votes, it still only got 30%. So I ran into a John Kasich voter, and that person just happened to be my brother Michael. And like I said, I don't think I'm talking out of school here, but in talking to him, and I don't argue politics. The truth is that my siblings, their politics are different from mine. I'm easily the most conservative of all of them. I think that I'm the one that pays attention the most, of course, because I do this show. I have a little bit different of an edge. They all went to school. They all went to college. They all graduated. They're all educated people. My education, though, was a little bit different. And, of course, they're on the average about 20 years older than I am. So them going through higher education, I think, was a little bit different than my experience. I'm a child of the 80s. They were children of the 60s. So there's a lot of things going on there. And as you know, being that I'm 45, they're all in their 60s now. But he is a guy, and he lives in Pennsylvania, who I guess is going to vote for John Kasich when the primaries come to Pennsylvania. And it's, from what I've seen, John Kasich doesn't poll too badly there, and I guess that makes sense, being that Ohio is right next door, and Pennsylvanians, he probably has a higher name recognition there than he does in the rest of the country. And it occurred to me in talking to my brother about this, and I told my brother, hey, I voted for Ted Cruz here in Florida, and I'm not saying that my brother Michael dislikes Ted Cruz, but my brother Michael, and this isn't new, and there are many people like this. This isn't to pick my brother Michael out. I love my brother. But there are a lot of people who see a guy like John Kasich as a guy who is able to mend that divide between Republicans and Democrats and this, what some people would say, this polarization that goes on. And really, that's the way John Kasich has been campaigning. I don't know if it's real or not, but that's certainly the way he's been campaigning. And the idea that John Kasich can bring together some consensus between Republicans and Democrats to get things done. And within that, you see, I guess, why John Kasich probably is still around, even though I believe that he's going broke. I talked about that a few days ago. And that is a much different idea regarding consensus and then either what I think Ted Cruz supporters want and what Donald Trump supporters want. Of course, Donald Trump supporters, to put it as generally as possible, you're led to believe that they just want to blow the whole thing up, figuratively, not literally, figuratively. That they believe the whole thing is just a mess, and they want to just dynamite all of it. The establishment, we know what the words and phrases that they use. Ted Cruz supporters, like myself, I think are people who are conservative. They believe in working within the system, but they don't believe in compromise. They don't believe in consensus. In fact, although I haven't talked about it recently, my idea about what you see when you look at the federal government is just a series of compromises going back several generations. You could say that the left has gotten their way sometimes, we on the right have gotten our way sometimes, but in getting each of their ways, they've compromised with the other. We'll give you that environmental protection law if you give us this tax break over here. You will do this over here. We'll mess around with the minimum wage if you let us do this and lower corporate taxes. Those are just examples. I'm not saying those are specific things that have happened, but I'm just trying to give you examples. So you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And see, I guess I'm a Ted Cruz supporter, even though I'm not sending him any money. I'm not going to any rallies or anything like that. But he being the guy who's left that most probably accurately expresses my political values, doesn't believe in that. We believe that as conservatives, we can win through arguments and making arguments to the American people, and we don't have to compromise with the other side. We're not looking for consensus. The only consensus we want is persuading the American people that we're right and drawing a consensus of them, not of our fellow politicians. There's a difference. But it seems that John Kasich, he's very much running in the line of the lane, I guess that's the popular saying this election season, the lane of a John McCain. And being that this John Kasich support talk came up with my brother Michael is no surprise, because my brother Michael has been a John McCain fan for a long time. Well before John McCain ever ran for president in 2008. So those are the people, I think, who continue to support John Kasich. They look at Donald Trump and say he's just way too radical one way. He just wants to go in there and tear everything up. Although I will admit that my brother Michael admitted that if Donald Trump is the nominee, that he would vote for him. That's what he's saying right now. And I think John Kasich voters look at Ted Cruz as being too radical, too much of a hardliner. Probably much like John McCain looks at Ted Cruz and says too much of a hardliner. And so that is that group that is left. And see, as I've said for a long time, I don't believe in consensus and compromise. I do not believe that the government is supposed to be a law factory. Whereas the problem we have is that too many politicians look at it as a law factory. It's no different than Boeing. Aluminum and composites and wiring and computers come in one end and a plane comes out on the other. And they look at it as politicians go in on one side of the building with a bunch of paper and pens, and on the other side, a law comes out. That's not how I see government. In fact, if nothing came out on the other end, that would be fine by me. That's why I keep making the statement that here we are as conservatives looking to roll back the expansiveness of government, the expansion of government on a daily basis. Okay? That is our goal. But the truth of it is if we could get some sort of agreement that the federal government and state governments wouldn't pass another law of any kind for the next 100 years, we could live with that. Even though Obamacare, even though immigration, because when you can have a sturdy set of laws that people know aren't going to be changed, the laws aren't going to be changed, the tax system isn't going to be changed, as bad as it is, but when people know that that's just the way it's going to be for a long time, then people can start to make good decisions. They can look at a future and know what are things going to be like 5 years from now? What's the government going to look like 5 years from now? What's my tax rate going to be 5 years from now? What's business regulation going to be five years from now? And they could say, you know what? It's going to be the same thing. Goodbye me. Here's what I can do. But when everything is in flux, and it only seemingly goes in one direction, and that means bigger government, more laws, more regulation, people get scared. They become fearful. They become shy. They want to take less risk. Moreover, I think that there's this then psychosis that takes over. The people just say, I'm just going to hunker down, and they get maybe a little depressed about what's going on. And they start to view their country in a detrimental way. Whereas we as conservatives, if we could just get it to stop the expansion of the budget, stop, we believe that in no time, people would be able to work within those conditions. Once again, even though Obamacare and all of this other stuff is terrible. But the reason it's terrible is because we just know that it's going to get bigger. It's going to get worse. And that's why we work to repeal it, because we know the government isn't stopping anywhere. It's not stopping it. It's expanding. And we want to shrink it. As long as they are intent on expanding it, we're going to be intent on shrinking it. That's the way it goes. But there is a segment of the population, and the truth is they're not necessarily liberal, they're not necessarily conservative, is that there are people out there who look at the government as being a law factory. And I don't believe that is what our founding fathers wanted. I don't know. I know we had some compromises, the Missouri Compromise and things like that, but if you look at the big deals in American history in consensus and compromise and things like that, compromise is what led us to the Civil War. We're going to make, okay, like this state, we're going to try to play this nice and fair. This state's going to be a slave state. This state's not going to be a slave state. This territory is going to be a slave territory. This territory is not going to be a slave territory. And we know what that got us. Nobody was happy, and it caused more deaths in Americans in a war than all of the other wars that the United States has been in combined. Now, of course, in that case, what helped that number? It was Americans fighting Americans. That's what drove the number up. But still, that was back in the 1860s when what was the population of the United States? 30 million or something? Some crazy small number? Don't know what it was. Maybe it's more than that. But it wasn't very high. If we were to have that amount of Americans as a percentage of the population die in the United States today, it would be in the millions upon millions of people if we had a civil war like we did in the 1860s. What led to that? Compromise. Trying to make sense. There's no sense of right and wrong. There's no sense that slavery is wrong, and that's what we need to fight for. The abolitionists tried to placate the slave owners. The slave owners tried to placate the abolitionists, and we know what that led to. Now, we don't have anything like that going along those lines today, but the effect is the same. Things just get worse. Things just get worse. And, it took somebody like Abraham Lincoln said, that's just not going to work anymore. And the funny thing, as much as we talk about compromise and consensus today, it's those politicians who didn't compromise and did not look for consensus that have left a mark on American history in a good way. Ronald Reagan stopped compromising with the Soviet Union. Abraham Lincoln stopped compromising with the slave owners, right? Our founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, the rest of them, Alexander Hamilton, stopped compromising with the King of England. Instead of just drawing a compromise in consensus. If you believe you're right, you should fight something. If you believe the other side is wrong, you should make sure that what they think never becomes enacted. Never gets enacted. Never exists. And if that causes the lawmaking machine of the United States to get gummed up, then that's just the way it goes. The money will continue to flow. The IRS will continue to collect all the taxes, everything. We just won't have any more laws. Any additional laws, I should say. No additional regulations. No more increases in the minimum wage. Nothing. And I could live with that. So, but those are who I think, in talking to my brother, who those people are. And as I have pointed out many times, the reason that compromise doesn't work For example, here's a perfect example where one group has not compromised with the other group, and and because of that, the American people are better for it. You know what that one is? Gun control. The NRA and other gun groups and a lot of private citizens who aren't even a member of the NRA will not compromise with those people who want guns to be taken away. If we were to take the average, like quote-unquote consensus, between the people who want guns to be taken away and the people who think everybody should own guns, what would we have? We'd probably have what you have in Canada. You can own a gun to hunt, can't own one for protection. That's what the consensus would look like. That's what the compromise would look like. Do you want that? As a right-winger, I don't want that. I don't want it. And so that's one way in which people on the right have fought for their values, have not looked for a compromise consensus position. In fact, we continue to push that forward with many states opening up their gun laws and rescinding them. And the Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, although that's not a state, allowing people to own guns more and more. And watching as the crime rate, the violent crime rate in this country decreases, except for those places where gun ownership is still restricted. And we're trying to work on those areas too, even though there aren't many Republicans who live there. And there are many conservatives who live there. But we do it anyway because we view that we are correct. It's not just all about us, the way we think about government. It's about everyone. Even if we think somebody's a liberal left-winger, you know what we think? We think they should be able to own a gun. Even if they don't want to own one, they should be able to buy one if they wish to purchase one. A Glock 19, a Smith & Wesson 357 revolver, whatever. You don't get to that through compromise and consensus. And that's what worries people like me about when those C words come up. So that's part of it. That's a large part of it. And dare I say it, and I think this is the exact reason why there's always been the suspicion to me, if John Kasich were to drop out, I'm not sure where his voters go. I don't know. Because I think that a lot of John Kasich voters, should he drop out, and they haven't cast their votes early yet in these primary states with the early voting, they could look at Donald Trump and how he says everything about making deals. Well, making deals is just another word. It's a D word for consensus and compromise. So it's the exact reason that on one hand I wish Kasich would drop out, but on the other hand, I'm not sure where his voters would go. I'm not sure that a lot of John Kasich fans are fans of Ted Cruz. I think that supporters of Marco Rubio much more easily can slide over to Ted Cruz than John Kasich supporters. Once again, if my brother is indicative of your average John Kasich voter. Just saying. Now, my brother Michael didn't come out and say that. In fact, Ted Cruz's name I just told him who I voted for in the Florida primary, and that's about the only time Ted Cruz's name got mentioned in the whole conversation. And it really wasn't even that long a conversation, maybe a minute or two. We were on the phone for a long time, but we were talking about other things. So I'm on the record for not being for compromise and consensus. I'm not for it because I think my ideas can win. I also know that in fighting for my ideas and not compromising would bring the law factory that is government, whether at the federal or state level, to a grinding halt. which is also something that I would enjoy because I also think that's right. So for us, once again, if I can call myself Ted Cruz supporters, we have to take a long, hard look at that and maybe really analyze who these John Kasich supporters are. I know that people make fun of them, and John Kasich is mathematically eliminated. But if he does drop out, what does that mean? Where are the voters going to go? Let's move on to something else. I got 4.5 minutes before the break. There was this comment. I was listening to a show. Was it Law Talk, the new Law Talk on Ricochet.com? It was something that I was listening to within the last 24 hours. And this came up about terrorism. And, of course, in relation to Brussels and Barack Obama being in Cuba and continue to party hard at the baseball game while all those people were getting killed in Brussels and him not stopping his visit there and coming back to the United States and trying to get in touch with the European Union people, the French people, the Belgian people. But he made this statement. I don't know if he made this statement recently. I know he said it in the past, but I don't know if he repeated these statistics within the last couple of days since the Brussels attack. But I want to talk about them. And the Barack Obama point of view, and I guess extrapolate that out, the liberal point of view, is that yes, terrorism is a problem. But more American citizens easily die by car wrecks on a daily basis than they will die in terrorist attacks. How many women and men were killed on American roads in 2001, and contrast that with how many people got killed on September 11th. Now we know, if you don't know, a lot of people get killed on highways and streets in the United States every year. Why? There's a lot of cars on the road. A lot of bad drivers, drunk drivers, drivers on drugs, speeding, young people, old people who can't see. There's a lot of reasons that driving is dangerous. However, it's safer than it ever has been. You should know that. Mainly because cars have gotten safer, not because drivers have gotten better. But in a way, I mean, it's such a putrid way, a kind of comparison, as if to diminish how important fighting terrorism is. And I bring this up because I know you and your conversations you're going to have with your liberal friends that statistic is going to come up. Yeah, liberalism. I mean, terrorism is a problem, but those numbers, the Americans are killed. Look at how many people get killed on the highways every year. Look how many people drown in their pools. Look how many people die slipping in the shower. That's way more than the average Americans that are getting killed in terrorism every year. And you've probably come up against. I've not had a chance to have an argument with somebody who's brought that up. But I want to give you some tips on what to say to that. Now, outside of the fact of just saying, don't you think that's really understating how important the war on terror should be and stopping terrorism? That's not good enough, I think, in this case. Instead, I think you should try it this way, and once again, I think I'm going to have to continue this after the break. Let's talk something about car safety and what has gone on with automobile safety in the last pretty much 50 years. Crumple zones, seat belts, speed limits, anti-lock brakes, stronger bumpers, different materials, better tires, all of these things. All of them meant to make driving safer. And I'm going to guess that maybe we've tried to teach driving a little bit differently in the last 50 years as well. Trying to come up with a better way to teach people how to drive before they actually get out on the road. So we've done all of these things to make driving safer. And you know what? It's worked. It's safer to drive than ever. And I want to keep that idea in your mind as I go to the break. We'll approach it afterwards. You've been listening to The Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Real radio for real Americans. Red State Talk Radio.
This is Brigitte Gabrielle from actforamerica.org. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not go to bed every night absolutely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place, then you're simply not working hard enough. Arm yourself with knowledge so that you too can act for America by listening to Red State Talk Radio. Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. RedStateTalkRadio.com. Lock it in and rip off the knob.
I can't defend my family because I live in Chicago.
I am free to defend my family with my AR-15 or handgun because I live in Wyoming.
I can't even protect myself if I'm attacked because I live in D.C.
I carry my 9mm in my purse anywhere I go in Texas.
I can't protect my small retail shop here in Brooklyn.
We keep guns behind the counter at our shop in Oklahoma. Only had to show it once.
Do you see a pattern?
Demand equal gun rights in America. Go to SAF.org now.
My name is Courtney Luster. I'm 21, well-educated, and unemployed American. I happen to be black, so I'm in the highest unemployment segment of the population, black youth unemployment. Notice I don't refer to myself as African American because I'm an American first. I'm a proud American who happens to have black skin. So please explain to me where African American fits into that equation. You're right, it doesn't. For over 60 years, the Democrat Party has used my fellow black Americans to maintain power in the federal and state governments. Why do I say that? Because I read history. While many of my friends are watching mindless videos, I choose to listen to Red State Talk Radio. Why? Because I want to educate myself, not entertain myself. Red State Talk Radio, America's premier conservative talk radio network. Hey, all you black American youth, be a Frederick Douglass Republican, not an Al Sharpton race pimp. Educate yourself. Listen to RedStateTalkRadio.com.
This is Michael Cutler, retired senior special agent with the former INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service. You should know that I'm also a lifelong Democrat, but ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. That's why, despite being a lifelong Democrat, I listen to Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. Lock it in and rip off the knob.
We're back at the Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about this comparison that Barack Obama and probably a lot of other liberals made between the amount of Americans who are killed, I guess, on a yearly basis due to terrorism, and any other accident that an American might get into, or I know that they've compared it to diseases, heart disease, and things like that. And I stated before the break that we've had various improvements in the example of automobile technology in the last 50 years, most of it based in safety. Yes, maybe air conditioning has gotten better. Engines have become more fuel efficient and even more powerful at the same time. You have Wi-Fi, you have satellite radio, you have all this other stuff, but a lot of it has to do with safety. So cars today aren't just more reliable, they're safer. And anybody who's old enough to remember the days of carburetors and drum brakes and all of that, somebody probably would have to be in their 60s and 70s by this time, will tell you so. Well, the government, like it or not, has had a lot to do with that. Mandating airbags, mandating seatbelts, working with the car industry, kind of coaxing them along. Once again, we can argue the merits of that and, the government getting involved in the private sector. We can have long discussions about that. But the fact is, the government has tried to make driving safer, even when it comes to how they build roads today, in contrast to how they were built 50, 60 years ago. Try to make them a little straighter, try to clear out the view, get trees and things away from the highways, putting fences up so deer and other animals can't come onto the highways where you're traveling 70, 75 miles an hour. So government has had a hand in that. Like it or not. Once again, like it or not. Likewise, any of this other stuff. What do you think Obamacare is supposed to be about? It's supposed to be about helping people with the health care. Now, I know as we conservatives, we don't like that. We believe it should be market-based. But there is an idea within liberals in government that the government should have, and people, regular liberals, that believe the government should have a hand in that. And because of that, people are going to have more insurance. They're going to have more health access to doctors and nurses and specialists. Thus, people will be healthier. Now, I don't think that's the way it's going to turn out, but that's the attitude. All right, so relating in the relationship between how many people die per year because of heart disease and how many people die due to terrorism. So they can make all of the people, how many people die in pools. Well, you know what? What has gone on there? A lot of people have taken upon themselves to put hard covers over their pools when they're not using them. Maybe locking them down sometime. So some little kid, 2 years old, 3 years old, can't fall into the pool and drown. They put fences up around their pool. They put gates that are locked around their pool. They put alarm systems. There's things that exist, I think, that if something falls into the water, an alarm will go off. All sorts of different patents and creations out there to try to keep mainly children from drowning in pools. All you can draw any slipping in the tub and everything else. And you know what? Government in one way or the other has had something to do with all of that. From cars to healthcare to safety in the home, on and on and on. Once again, we can debate the extent of that and whether in the end it's a net good or not. But government wants to be involved. So it seems odd to me then, for example, going back to the pool question, that the government will agree that, yes, we recommend that if you want to keep your children from drowning in the pool, you should put up a fence around your pool. But the government says, no, we don't want to build a fence between us and Mexico. Going back to the car example, they will push hard for the car companies to put airbags in and analog brakes and seat belts and all these things. But fighting terrorism, just not that interested. We're not interested in putting boots on the ground against ISIS. We're not interested in doing the kind of things that it takes. We don't want to profile. We don't want to say Islamic terror. But what's funny is these same people who say that don't realize the government getting involved in some of these things, once again, like it or not, has changed, for example, driving and car deaths in the United States. So he can say all he wants comparing all these numbers. Well, you know what? The government got involved in all of those things, those comparisons, those statistics you're making up. So government should probably be more involved in terrorism as well. It just seems like a funny comparison on it. I know the people who said it, including the president himself, think it's like the smartest thing in the world. Well, we don't want to overstate how bad terrorism is. Well, you know what? Are you going to stop, being that the rate of people dying in cars has come down so much over the last 50 years? Are you going to stop regulating how cars should be made? Of course not. Because I guess to the government, the number is still too high. And plus, government just likes to be involved in all of this stuff. It's just funny to me that a president of the United States brings up these areas of our life where government has definitely been involved, and then thinks of terrorism as something that, well, we're going to do what we can, but we're not going to push it. That's what I hear because, the numbers just aren't high enough yet. So, just so we're clear, the government can get really, really, really involved in how a car is made, but when it comes to terrorism, well, maybe it's just best that people just look out for themselves. And you know what? If that's going to be the attitude over government, that's exactly what people are going to have to do. And that's, I chuckle here, but it's not funny. So it's just interesting to me. And I want you to, and this is, I got the statistics from this global research. It was a Canadian liberal site comparing all these statistics and where terrorism, not just in the United States, but in the world falls. And you're right, and they're right. Way more people in the world die because of car accidents than terrorism every year. I know. I don't think that's really the point. I don't think the point here is to compare numbers. It's not like car wrecks or car accidents is some sort of sentient entity that is stalking people in the United States and just rising up to kill them once in a while. Car accidents are caused by people, mainly. Sometimes it's a malfunction of the car, but most of the time it's just people driving not the way they should, not paying attention, being drunk, or whatever. But car accidents are not a monster. So it's all you can do is do what you can to try to control it here and there by making cars better, teaching people better skills. But terrorism is a sentient entity brought on by sentient people who want to take over the world. Car accidents don't want to take over the world because car accidents don't have a brain. It's just an incident. Whereas, yes, a terrorist act is an incident, but it's caused on purpose by people who have an agenda. And it just shows you how small-minded people are that try to compare the two. And I can't help but think when I'm talking about this topic, when it comes to mind, and I know this isn't supposed to be funny as much as funny as it may come across, that if terrorists were a bunch of Tea Party people, a bunch of conservatives like myself, who were blowing up airports and subways and flying planes into buildings, Barack Obama would send the entire military, call every National Guard person, no matter how old they were, out onto the streets, highways, airports, subway systems of the United States to take us all down. Let's not forget that. And any conservatives who might be a part of that, who don't want to be a part of it because they're conservatives, well, they'd all be thrown in Leavenworth. That's what would happen. If it was a bunch of conservatives in the Middle East who were trying to take down Assad in Syria, Barack Obama would be on the side of Assad. Let's just get right to it. Can't we? Those car statistics would never come up. He'd never say, well, I'd like to stop the conservatives, but look, they really don't kill that many people per year. It'd never come up. It'd never come up. He'd say, conservatives have killed somebody somewhere with a gun. I got to do something about it. That's what also makes this entire comparison laughable and disgusting. But I send that out to you so you can be prepared if you happen to run into somebody like that. Did you see that another cop is dead? This happened in Indiana. I believe that the shooter was black. 2 cops in Indiana were serving a warrant for somebody who had to do with drug possession, something like that. And the guy didn't show up for court. So they went looking for this guy, and they showed up at this house, and one of the deputies got shot, and the other one got murdered. And then I think the suspect, the person they were trying to serve the warrant to, was dead as well. Wasn't even, is the way I read the news story, wasn't even that big of a deal. It wasn't like this person, this guy was marketing, got caught with a ton of cocaine or anything like that. Still, when the cops showed up, this suspect shot at the police, and a policeman ended up dead, and the person who's supposed to get the warrant ended up dead. And every time I hear one of these stories, and it seems like how the bad guy reacts in relation to the crime, it makes me think of Black Lives Matter. And this thought started coming up, going back to that incident that I believe happened in Texas, where a black woman got pulled over. She didn't necessarily do anything. Was she speeding? Was her registration out of date? Was she just driving on a suspended license? She wasn't necessarily committing any, overt violent crime, but she got pulled over. And then she ended up giving a hard time to the cops. Remember that? Forget her name now. It happened, 6 months ago, something? And because of the way she acted out and was abusive to the cop, he had to take her in, and then she ended up committing suicide while she was in jail. And I told you back then, I wonder if what was going through her head as she was getting pulled over was, a cop's pulling me over, I need to act out, I need to give this cop a piece of my mind, I need to resist, because that's what these violent black people think I should do. And if I don't, how are they going to feel about it? What if they find out that I just got pulled over, took my ticket, was on my way, and never gave the cop a hard time? What are those people going to do to me? And I've noticed, and I think I've brought it up since then, there have been a couple stories that have popped up that feel like that to me. Where all people had to do was go along with what the cop wanted them to do. No big deal. Wasn't like they were a murderer or a rapist or anything, but just minor offenses. And then all of a sudden they start acting out, and in the end, bullets start flying. What happened here in Indiana sounds like that. That this guy thought it was his time to, stand up for the cause. Got to represent for my fellow violent people who expect me to do this, whereas I've told you over and over and over, these leaders of Black Lives Matter want to have nothing to do with going to jail. They want other people to do their bidding. They'll get out there and organize all this and raise money and make sure people show up here and get in trouble, and make sure people show up there and get in trouble. But the actual people who are leading all this don't want to have they don't want to see the inside of a jail cell the rest of their lives, and they're not going to break any laws to do it either. They'll expect lackeys to do it. In addition, they'll expect people to get caught up in the frenzy of all of it and just do it on their own, like I believe that woman did in Texas, and now this guy did in Indiana. Now, it may be we find out that this guy has a violent history or something like that. I didn't check his rap sheet. But this particular reason that these cops were there on a particular day to do something, it doesn't seem to me was worth the guns coming out and somebody dying. So this is it's more than just Black Lives Matter existing. It's more than just them organizing. It's more than them just talking about how cops should be treated and all of that. It's also people who maybe have never gone to a Black Lives Matter rally or anything like that, but then still think that they need that their opinion has been changed. So, a chord is struck within them that thinks that, no different than being part of a sorority or a fraternity, that you have to stick up for my brothers, have to stick up for my sisters, even though those brothers and sisters are doing things that are wrong and committing crimes and inciting violence and stuff like that. That's the real danger of it. It's more than just those groups that get together. It's the person 100 miles away, 500 miles away that sees that and identifies with it. That's what makes all of this violence that comes out of Black Lives Matter, that's what makes it so random. And it gets people pulled in who otherwise, I could convince myself if this Black Lives Matter and all this cop violence wasn't going on for the last year, then maybe what happens in Indiana is those guys just show up at that house. The guy comes out of the house. He gets handcuffed. He gets taken downtown. He gets fingerprinted, all that. And then a day later, somebody gets him out on bail again. That goes through my head every time I see one of these incidents where it seems like a simple thing for a cop to do, and in the end, a cop ends up dead. Just a thought. Just a thought. And it all sucks. It all sucks. One more thing before I go. There is a movement that started, I guess, just a couple years ago. It's called Lean In Together. And I guess the NBA is having something to do with it. I don't watch the NBA. And in fact, I haven't even watched much of March Madness. Just too much going on. But Lean In Together is started by a woman who was high up in Facebook. She's CEO Sheryl Sandberg. And it's something along the lines of men and women working together, men seeing that women are their equal, and it's all about, and you can go, unfortunately, you can go on ESPN.com and see that Popovich, the coach of the San Antonio Spurs, he has an assistant who's a woman, and how they're leaning in together and working together and all this. And it all sounds so good. By the way, if you don't know who Sheryl Sandberg is, also, she's the woman who wanted to ban the word bossy. Remember that from a couple years ago? Yeah, this is that chick. And I feel unfortunate her husband died last year in some sort of accident, and that sucks. But sticking to the political side of this, I could have sworn that feminists told us that women don't need men. I could have sworn that. I could have sworn that for the last 40, 50 years that the message has been men are idiots. Men are violent. Men are this. Men are dumb. Men are stupid. You look at every sitcom out there. The guy's stupid. The mother knows everything. And then after all of that, you expect us to work with you. Really. I could have sworn it was sisters are going to do it on their own. We don't need men. And now all of a sudden here we got 2 years of Lean In Together. Those feminists, they have no shame. No shame whatsoever, but I got to go. You can email me at edwarddenzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Denzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. You can go to edwarddenzel.com where you can listen to you'll find them, all my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also find them at Podmatic, Podbean, YouTube, SoundCloud. You can also go to edwarddenzel.com/book where you can download for free the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight and listening to the Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio.